Okay, good morning again. And I want to run through these opening readings just a moment to set the stage. But I do want to tell you that I've probably done more work getting ready for this morning than any other time. And what usually happens when I do that is I get nervous and confused, and so we'll see what happens. So. And I know when I listen to somebody else, oftentimes what comes into my mind is, "What's your point? Where are you going with this? And how does this relate to my life? What's the point of trying to talk about this?" So I want to talk about that at the beginning. The overarching theme of this is, what is a spiritual awakening, and how can what Ignatius go through contribute to our spiritual awakening personally. So I just want to go back through these readings because they're coming from different places. And reading number one, which says, this is from the 24-hour book, June 8th. Your life has been given you mainly for the purpose of training your soul. Um, we're going to be doing a lot of talk about primary purpose, and what I believe, for me, that uh, a spiritual awakening is really a change in my primary purpose. And I've been in this program for 15 years now, um, and I think in terms of a spiritual awakening, I think I felt that the God talk is not theoretical, it's for real. I felt that in the middle of the ninth step promises, just as the book predicts. It says, before we're halfway through, it's talking about halfway through our amends in step 9. Because I realized I was changing, I was doing things I never thought it would be possible for me to do. This was particularly making an amend to my ex-wife, the mother of my children, and that was a reason why I really didn't get into these steps, because I didn't even want to get to that point. Um, and then at 10 years, I went into this depression, and finally coming out of that, I understood two things that I really hadn't gotten before. One, and I know I've said this before, but hear me out. One was that the problem with powerlessness was over me. It was not my powerlessness over you or over the world. It was my powerlessness over my reactions to the stuff happening out there in my life. I had tried all my life to get out there just right so I could feel okay inside. And the reason I loved alcohol was because it made me feel okay in spite of whatever was going on. It made me feel okay, and that's what I wanted. Um, so coming out of that depression, I understood what powerlessness meant for me. And I also understood how hard I have to work at this on a daily basis. And I don't feel that today, because I'm glad to work hard at it on a daily basis. But there were times when I just had to kind of push through. And um, I remember Emmett Fox has this thing, the two orations or something, that you need inspiration and you need perspiration. And I think it shows up for us in that inspiration is what we call faith, and perspiration is what we call work. And another way that perspiration shows up is the word perseverance, that we keep going at what we're doing, even though we're feeling horrible. That as an act of faith, we keep doing the stuff that we do here in the Fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous, even though we don't feel very good. So back to this first reading, your life has been given you mainly for the purpose of training your soul. I believe for me that awareness of my soul as different than my human body mind, as my different than my human self, has been a growing awareness through this process. And um, I made a real turn personally in reading this book, Journey of Souls, that I've sent noted it in emails before, and I can do it again if you want to know. But this PhD hypnotherapist chronicles the life of the soul while it's in a human body and also when it's not, and what happens after death and what happens as the human soul gets ready for the next life. And it really opened my mind. I mean, I would have told you I believe I have a soul, but I didn't. It's allowed me to wear my life more like a loose garment. I'm less concerned today about what happens to this particular body mind, and I'm more concerned about what's going on with my soul. And I believe spiritual work is making this turn from the human agenda to the spiritual agenda. And the thing I know, for me, I know what my human agenda is. I know what my body mind wants. It's been telling me all my life what it wants. And I've tried to satisfy it, and it's never happened. I've just never satisfied my human ego. As soon as I accomplish whatever it says yeah but, and it's got another thing that needs to change in order for it to be happy. And now I'm able to let it rant, and not live under its tyranny. We use the word spiritual freedom. I believe that's freedom from the tyranny of the human self. So, at any rate, I love that reading number one. The second one, this is Ignatius, and he's essentially saying the same thing. You're here for your spiritual growth. You're not here to satisfy your body and your mind. I find my human agenda is self-preservation is number one, self-gratification is number two, self-justification is number three. It's first, person, but last, stay, live, be safe, whatever. Second is feel as good as you can, and third is mentally justify your behavior, self-justification. And I do not believe that that's why my soul is here. My soul is here to go through some kind of spiritual growth. And honestly, I don't know why I say that. I don't know what that is. Um, and that's why I take step 11, and other places where it says the same thing. Step 11 says sought to improve our conscious contact. So the first objective here is getting conscious contact, and that's an initial sort of spiritual awakening. The second objective is to improve that conscious contact through prayer and meditation and the other things that we do, our one-on-one interactions, our meetings, our book, reading and understanding our book, and obviously our service commitments. Service is such a wonderful way to take the mind away from its personal, my specific agenda, and pay more attention to you than I'm paying attention to me. And I think that's why this reading well, number three. So number three is saying, if this whole business of Alcoholics Anonymous means anything, this is really quite a statement. And it's early in the book. It's page 28. If what we have learned and seen and felt means anything, it means that every single one of us, no matter what our race, creed, color, are the children of a living, loving creator with whom we may form a relationship. Now, this is the thing that's been jumping out at me lately, is how everything is about relationship, and about how all my relationships were unilateral. I wanted something from the relationship, and so they inevitably did not work out, and we wind up the first of the bedevilments on page 52. We were having trouble with personal relationships. We couldn't control our emotional natures. We were prey to misery and depression. That's how we come in here. And we have no idea why even. So so I love that statement that allows me. I believe the job of a sponsor, well, sponsor has many jobs, but one of them is faith building. I believe that's the purpose of a meeting. I mean, the primary purpose of a meeting, as stated, is to stay sober and help another alcoholic achieve sobriety. That's it. It's not to be restored to sanity. It's not to having had a spiritual awakening as a result of these steps. The primary purpose of a meeting is to stay sober and help another alcoholic achieve sobriety. And that's important for me to remember. But an underlying, I believe, purpose of a meeting is to build my faith that this thing is for real, that this is not merely an intellectual thing. This is a spiritual path with a real spiritual result that we call a spiritual awakening. And life really changes once that happens. So then I love number 4. If you're as seriously alcoholic as we were, we only get these 2 choices. One is keep doing what we're doing and try to blot out of our mind, distract our minds from how miserable we are. And the other is to accept spiritual help. And I love that they say accept. They don't say seek spiritual help. It's not like you got to go find it. It's like accept it. It's already there waiting for you to pay attention to it. It's a wonderful statement. So how do I do that? Well, I go through the steps. You hear over and over in this approach that we do 1 through 9 to get to the starting line. The starting line of this, I believe, my work in the Fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous is living in 10, 11, and 12 every day. And you can break 10, 11, and 12 down to pause is step 10. Asking and listening for direction from a higher power is step 11. And then doing the action, the into action part is step 12. Pause, ask, listen, do. Or quit playing God, invite God in. And we're given these different relationships to invite God in, and then do as directed. And I copied before this meeting that this is a wonderful statement, I believe, from page 100 of the big book, which is in the chapter called Working with Others. Both you and the new man must walk and the new person must walk day by day in the path of spiritual progress. If you persist, remarkable things will happen. When we look back, we realize that the things which came to us when we put ourselves in God's hands were better than anything we could have planned. And get this, follow the dictates of a higher power, and you will presently live in a new and wonderful world, no matter what your present circumstances. Dude, I mean, that's quite and I love that he doesn't say follow the dictates of the higher power. Doesn't say there's only one, and you gotta work with our conception of a higher power, your own personal sense of a higher power. um, and you'll presently live in a new. That's a spiritual awakening. That's another way of saying it. So anyway, okay, so and then number 5, reading number 5 every day. This is, I believe, one of our greatest spiritual tools in the book. It's the step 10 question. The step 10 gives us a protocol for handling our negative feelings whenever we feel selfish, dishonest, resentful, or frightened. Whenever we feel those things, which is really what step 4 is about. We pray at once for removal. We share with somebody, we make amends if called for, and we turn our mind to service. Well, how am I going to turn my mind to service? The protocol is on page 84. Over on page 85, as it's winding down step 10, It says, how can I best serve thee? Thy will, not mine, be done. These are thoughts which must, not suggested, must go with us constantly. So I can turn my mind to service by trying to ask that question in the middle of whatever disaster I'm in the middle of. And that's what I believe. I started coming out of this depression, which felt like it was the longest, deepest I'd ever experienced. And I felt like I started to come out of it as I was starting to entertain the thought, if you ever do get out of this, if you don't commit suicide, you're going to have some experience and some information that is very relevant to the Fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous, because depression is one of those undercurrents that so many of us talk about. And as I said, it's in the bedevilments. We're prey to misery and depression. It's how we come in here. So, okay. So, and then finally, this number 6 to me is it's the greatest promise technique in the book. It's given me the whole deal in one statement, just to the extent that I humbly rely on God. It's on page 68, the fear page. Just to the extent that I humbly rely on God and do as I think God would have me do, I will be enabled. I will get the power to meet whatever calamity is going on in my moment today, right here, right now, with serenity, with knowing that in spite of all this, I am okay. It is okay. Uh, I'm talking personally, the overarching question for me has been uh, the feeling that I'm here to do my job. My confusion has been what my job is. And it just flashed. I hope everybody's okay. Um, so feeling I know what my job is has been very important to me, and I feel like I'm finally, uh, thanks to the big book and thanks to Saint Ignatius, I'm starting to understand my job, as Saint Ignatius says it, is to trust, love, and serve my Creator. And if I do that, I will be able to meet my life with a sense of okayness, with a sense of serenity, as opposed to calamity. So, okay. So I want to start here with a couple of the book's descriptions of spiritual awakenings, and then go to Bill's. And so, um, oh yeah, and I want to start with we've gone over all this. If you did the things on the big book, you've heard this before, but so this is on page 27, and I believe that pages 25, 26, 27 are really uh, wonderful statements of the problem. And so the setup is Roland Hazzard, a wealthy New England businessman, knows he has a drinking problem. He's gone over to Europe to go through psychotherapy with Carl Jung, and he spends a good bit of time with Carl Jung, and he leaves there thinking, I really understand myself now. It's like Bill saying self-knowledge, that's the answer. And he gets drunk pretty quick. And so he's now back to Jung, and he's going, what's the deal here? Why did I get drunk so quickly? And Jung says to him on page 27, you have the mind of a chronic alcoholic. I have never seen one single case recover where that state of mind existed to the extent that it does in you. Can you imagine? You've spent all this money, time, you've gone to a different continent, met with one of the finest psychiatrists in the world, and he says, nope, I gave it my best, but I have never seen one single case recover. It's like, why didn't you tell me that at the start? Why did I go through all this? Uh, so Roland goes, no exceptions, and then Dr. Jung says this, and what he's doing is he's describing a spiritual awakening. Um, yes, replied the doctor, there are exceptions to cases such as yours have been occurring since early times. Now he means thousands of years, because alcoholism is not a modern problem. It's been going on forever. Um, Here and there, once in a while, alcoholics have had what are called vital spiritual experiences. So that's a spiritual awakening. That's what we're trying to not achieve, but to experience here. Um, to me, these occurrences are phenomena. Well, there's an interesting letter. Phenomena is something I can see, but I can't explain. I can see it, so I don't doubt its reality, but I can't explain it, whether it's northern lights or something else. Um, when Bill Wilson wrote with talked to Carl Jung later in life, he Carl Jung said, "They're not phenomena. I know this a spiritual experience is for real, but because of my standing in the medical community, I couldn't talk like that. So I had to say they were phenomena." But here's his description of a spiritual awakening. Ideas, emotions, attitudes, which were once the guiding forces of the lives of these people, are suddenly, and the spiritual appendix would add, or gradually. That's very important, because the importance of the spiritual appendix is most of us don't have Bill's kind of experience. Most of us, this happens slowly, and we don't even recognize it till all of a sudden we're in a situation where we're realizing, I'm not thinking about drinking. I'm not resenting this person. I'm not ready to fight with them about it or run. I don't want to run. That something's going on. So, guiding forces of the lives of these men suddenly or gradually cast to one side, and a completely new set of conceptions and motives, a completely new set. And this is not rehashing our old ideas. This is a new set of conceptions and motives begin to dominate them. When I heard the third step prayer, relieve me of the bondage of self, boom, I was there, because I felt tremendous bondage of self. And I had to drink to soften that pain that I couldn't feel. I just couldn't handle it. Um, that's the tyranny of the human ego, I believe. There's a saying about how the mind, or you could say the ego, is a wonderful servant and a terrible master. If I let my life be controlled by this thing, I'm just going to be in pain all the time, because I'm never going to satisfy this thing. Um, so, and then, so, but so that's why I love dictates of a higher power. This, and you use the word dominate. Well, none of us want to be dominated. We're trying to escape from that whole theme, and yet they bring it in terms of our devotion. I think one of the things that's challenging about Saint Ignatius, is that he was a very passionate man, and very devoted to the church, devoted to Mother Mary, and obviously to Jesus as a spiritual leader, spiritual teacher, spiritual hero, whatever. Um, but his autobiography is as dry as a bone. You read his autobiography, and it's like he refers to himself as the pilgrim. So then the pilgrim did this, and then the pilgrim did that. It's not exciting stuff. So most of us that are interested in following his life, we have to go to different stuff to get a sense of his passion and a sense of his devotion. Um, so, at any rate, let's see. So, I've been trying to produce some such emotional rearrangement with you. With many individuals, I've succeeded, but I've never been successful with an alcoholic of your description, which means with a mind like yours. Now, what Jung does not know is that at this very moment, the same time, Dr. Silkworth is in New York saying there's something different about you guys physically. You process alcohol differently than normal drinkers. Normal drinkers stop. They drink one or two, they get wherever they want to go, and they stop. And we can't stop. If we start, we can't stop. Jung doesn't know that. He doesn't know that the first challenge is staying away from drink number one. Um, and then so he tells Roland about the spiritual experience, and upon hearing this, our friend Roland was somewhat relieved, for he reflected that after all, he was a good church member. Then what happens? Jung says this hope, however, was destroyed by the doctors telling him that while his religious convictions were very good, in his case, they did not spell the necessary vital spiritual experience. What Jung also doesn't know is that the Oxford groups are at work in New York City, where Roland Hazzard got sober. And that's where Roland took Ebby. And so I find that fascinating because uh, my sponsor drilled me in the three aspects of our disease: the physical aspect, which Dr. Silkworth is saying, you guys are different physically; the mental aspect, which is that my mind needs the relief from alcohol so bad that it denies that I can't drink normally. It denies that I can't have a few drinks and stop at that. And then the spiritual aspect. Well, the Oxford groups are the spiritual aspect, Silkworth is the physical aspect, and Jung is the mental aspect. He's trying to work with the mind to bring somebody to a different way of life. Okay, so, and then one other spiritual experience before we get to Bill's. And this is on page 56. It's the end of We Agnostics. And I'm just doing this because I feel like that our ultimate aim is a relationship with our Creator. That's what I believe the steps in AA are all about, is shifting from a life of self-reliance, running on our intellect or our bodies, could be either one, to a life where we are trying to follow the dictates of a higher power. We are trying to ask God to mold our ideals and help us live up to them. Evidence of a spiritual awakening is, evidence of our turn to doing that, we're calling a spiritual awakening. So this is page 56. It's Fitzmayo. He shows up as our Southern friend later on in the book, in the stories. And our friend was a minister's son. So he believed he got an overdose of religious education. He winds up in a hospital, and paragraph says, one night when confined in a hospital, approached by an alcoholic who had known a spiritual experience, our friend's gorge rose as he bitterly cried out, if there is a God, he certainly hasn't done anything for me. Later, let's see where it is. Later, alone in his room, he asked himself this question: is it possible that all the religious people I have known are wrong? Interesting question. We got all these people out there, atheists saying, nah, agnostics saying, well, I don't know, maybe. Is it possible that people that speak of God are wrong? While pondering the answer, he felt as though he lived in hell. Then, like a thunderbolt, a great thought came. It crowded out all else. Who are you to say there is no God? That doesn't matter, but what happens next? This man recounts that he tumbled out of bed to his knees. In a few seconds, he was overwhelmed by a conviction of the presence of God. It poured over and through him with the certainty and majesty of a great tide at flood. The barriers he had built through the years were swept away. And then this is what I just totally love. He stood in the presence of infinite power and love. He had stepped from bridge to shore for the first time. He lived in conscious companionship with his creator. That's quite a spiritual awakening. And I'll remind you that we talk about 3 levels of miracles in the big book. And the first level is in the 10th step promises, where we realize that we're not even thinking about drinking, where that used to be the only thing we thought about. I need relief from alcohol and I'm going to have a drink. We're not even thinking about it. And we recognize that we didn't accomplish that. It just happened. That's the miracle of it, is what the book says. 10 step promises are, I don't know, page 85, I guess it's page 85. Yeah, top of page 85. There's another level, I believe, where it's back, I believe it's on 51, where the consciousness of the presence of God becomes the most important fact of my life. I can say that today. I wouldn't have said it. I don't think I would have said it 5 years ago. I'm not sure, but I'm conscious today that that's the most important fact of my life, beyond anything else. That I have this sense of a higher power, even though I can't say much about it. The third level is in the 5th step promises. We feel as though we are walking on the broad highway hand in hand with the spirit of the universe. That's a conscious relationship with our creator, walking hand in hand. So what I want to do with the rest of the time is to read about Bill's spiritual awakening, because that's what creates the book, brings us to the book. And this was first written in Alcoholics Anonymous Comes of Age, but this is from Pass It On, the Bill's biography. And if you have a copy or you want to find a copy, this stuff is coming. It's the end of chapter 5. It's going to start on page 118, and I'm going to read through 121. Then, believe it or not, we will be done for the day. Okay, so Pass It On, page 118. Soon I knelt among the sweating, stinking penitents. Maybe then and there, for the very first time, I was penitent. Something had touched me. I guess it was more than that. I was hit. I felt a wild impulse to talk. Jumping to my feet, I began. So here's Bill, drunk, in a meeting of the Oxford groups at this mission that Sam Shoemaker ran in New York City. And he's with Ebby, and he causes quite a scene, although everybody thought what he shared was good, even though he couldn't remember what it was. And then on page 19, it starts talking about, I then told Bill, this is somebody else who's present, we usually had the witnessing from the platform first, then open the meeting so anybody could witness. Bill told us he had been at Calvary Church the previous night, saw Ebby T get up in the pulpit and give witness to the fact that with the help of God, he'd been sober for a number of months. So he gets up and he starts talking, and then the book says, but Bill was not quite ready. He drank on for another 2 or 3 days. However, going to the mission had been more than a drunken impulse. He pondered the experience. In the charged atmosphere of the meeting room, he had been aware of deep feelings. But again, he fought those feelings, brushed them away. They went against both reason and education. Isn't that an interesting statement? He's saying what he felt there was not, didn't make sense to his intellectual mind, and it was against his education. That's one of the challenges of this. We've all been socialized in a certain way, and thinking about this stuff that's not what most of the world is doing. just the way it is. Um, let's see. But he fought these feelings, brushed them away. They went against both reason and education, yet reason told him that his illness had made him as helpless as a cancer victim. If he had cancer, he would be doing anything, is what he says. He would go to any lengths to solve cancer, but that's why it's so important that we do approach this, the disease of alcoholism, as a disease with a treatment. And then the only question is, do I want to treat my disease? What was so different about alcoholism? It was a cancer of sorts, blah, blah, blah. He felt a strong desire to return to the hospital and to Dr. Silkworth. Leaving a note for Lois, he set out for Towns Hospital. He had only 6 cents. This really reminds you about inflation. He's got 6 cents, you know, um, and that left a penny after the subway fare. So he's the subway fare was a nickel. Um, Along the way, he managed to obtain 4 bottles of beer from a grocery store where he had a little credit. Then he reached the hospital. When he reached the hospital, he'd finished 3 of the bottles. Dr. Silkworth met him in the hall. So, and Silkworth he talks. This is the 4th time that Ebby's been in there. I mean that Wilson has been in there to Towns Hospital. Bill was in high spirits, waving the bottle around. He announced he had found something. He found this spiritual experience in the Oxford groups. Silkworth remembered that Bill was carrying 2 books on philosophy from which he hoped to gain new inspiration. He received the then current Towns treatment, barbiturates to sedate him and belladonna for reducing stomach acids. As the effects of the alcohol wore away, it had not been one of his worst binges. Bill, fell into a deep depression and rebellion. And I believe my depression was a rebellion. Um, he slid into a very deep, let's see, I'm sorry, I've got to pay attention here. He fell into a deep depression and rebellion. He wanted the sobriety Ebby had found, but he couldn't believe in the God Ebby talked about. His own feelings experienced at the mission had faded with the alcohol. In a few days, Ebby visited him. Again, they talked as they had at the kitchen table. Ebby's visit made Bill momentarily less depressed, but after Ebby left, Bill slid into a very deep melancholy. He was filled with guilt and remorse over the way he had treated Lois. Lois, who had stood by him unwavering throughout. He thought about the miraculous moments they had shared, standing on the Newport cliffs the night before he sailed for England, camping trips, wonderful years as motorcycle bums, triumphs and failures on Wall Street. He thought about Winchester Cathedral and the moment he had almost believed in God. Now he and Lois were waiting for the end. Now there was nothing ahead but death or madness. This was the finish, the jumping off place. The terrifying darkness had become complete, Bill said. In agony of spirit, I again thought of the cancer of alcoholism which now consumed me in mind and spirit and soon the body. The abyss gaped before me. In his helplessness and desperation, Bill cried out, I'll do anything, anything at all. He had reached a point of total, utter deflation, a state of complete, absolute surrender with neither faith nor hope. This is interesting. With neither faith nor hope, he cried out, If there be a God, let him show himself. Um, what happened next was electric. Suddenly, my room blazed with an indescribably white light. I was seized with an ecstasy beyond description. Every joy I had known was pale by comparison. The light, the ecstasy, I was conscious of nothing else for a time. Then, seen in my mind's eye, there was a mountain. I stood upon its summit, where a great wind blew, a wind not of air, but of spirit. In great, clean strength, it blew right through me. Then came the blazing thought, you are a free man. He's free of the ego's tyranny. I know not at all how long I remained in this state, but finally the light and ecstasy subsided. I again saw the wall of my room. As I became more quiet, a great peace stole over me, and this was accompanied by a sensation difficult to describe. I became acutely conscious of a presence, capitalized, which seemed like a veritable sea of living spirit. I lay on the shores of the new world. This, I thought, must be the great reality. This is the God of the preachers. Savoring my new world, I remained in this state for a long time. I seemed to be possessed by the absolute, and the curious conviction deepened that no matter how wrong things seemed to be, there could be no question of the ultimate rightness of God's universe. For the first time, I felt that I had really belonged. I knew that I was loved and could love in return. I thanked my God, who had given me a glimpse of his absolute self. Even though a pilgrim on an uncertain highway, I need be concerned no more, for I had glimpsed the great beyond. He just had his 39th birthday. He still had a half of his life ahead of him. He always said that after that experience, he never doubted the existence of God. He never took another drink. So, so, um, so I think it's very important when we hear these spiritual experiences that people had to remember that spiritual appendix, that that's not the way it happens for most of us. But the fact that we read these experiences, and if you're able to not doubt them, hopefully that will give you faith, inspiration to keep at this thing, and summon up the perseverance to go to any lengths to get it. So I'm going to stop there by ringing this gong, and thank you all for being here, and we'll have some open discussion for a little bit. So thank you.